Ladies and gentlemen, we are preparing to open the World Excellence Awards portion of the evening, and we would like to begin by hearing from someone who is well known and dear to us at the World Business Angel Investment Forum. He was the United Kingdom's Business Person of the Year, Angel Investor of the Year, has a tremendous portfolio of companies that he has invested in and had amazing success with. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome again Peter Crowley to come to the stage and enlighten us. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for Peter.
Thank you. Excellent. Okay. Welcome everybody. I hope you've enjoyed your food so far. I'm going to talk about something that is close to my heart and to Baybars, which is how governments can help entrepreneurs and scale startups. I've been very honoured to be asked to speak at this event. It's actually my fifth visit to Turkey. The first time I visited Turkey was in May 1989. We were on the beach near Bodrum, and who should park up just next to us but Prince Charles with Camilla. So this was the point where Prince Charles was starting to lose interest in Diana, and they parked the boat and walked onto the shore past our children. So that was the first time. Anyway, dear Mr. and Mrs. President of the Republic of Macedonia, Mr. Development Minister of the Republic of Turkey, who's just arrived, well done, Mr. Innovation Minister of Kosovo, Mr. Former In-House Minister of the Kingdom of Bahrain, Mrs. Parliament Member of Turkey and Mrs. Parliament Member of Kosovo, and dear guests. I don't normally read out my talks and speeches, but I'm very passionate about my subject, and I speak very fast. English is a global language for entrepreneurs, and as you heard earlier from the President, today is the day for speaking in one's own mother tongue, so you have to listen to my English. I will say that this speech will be available, if anybody wants it, online. Baybars will distribute it if he wants that. So Baybars has asked me to spend only 5 minutes sharing my experiences from visiting early stage ecosystems in Silicon Valley, the East Coast, Singapore, Bangalore, all over Europe, and particularly the UK. Quiet please. Describe what I've seen that helps and also hinders scale startups. Because everybody in this room wants that. We don't want failures. We don't want zombies. We don't want lifestyle businesses. We want companies that scale rapidly and fast to be big. As was said earlier on, if you were here by Peter, that statistically over half of all startups will fail within a few years. Another 30% will not scale, and only 1 or 2 will actually scale enough to produce wealth for the founders, the investors, and the positive side effect for governments, which is increased employment, intellectual property, brands, patents, exports, of course, and finally, taxation. All governments need taxation. If you can scale a company, it will produce that. So that's positive for the economy and the nation. The OECD definition of a scale-up is one that has at least 10 employees at the start and grows by 20% per year for at least 3 years. But that's not very exciting really, is it? You've got a company that's got 10, grows 20% every year for 3 years. You've only then got 17 employees. We want them to grow much faster and further than that. So we want to build the businesses like that. Now, just to make a little bit of a joke here, choosing these startups has been likened to kissing frogs to see if they turn into princes. Until this is the Grimm Brothers fairy tale. And I'm going to try and say this in Turkish, Baybars, so you can correct me later. This is Kubra Prince, is it? The frog prince. Apologies. This, of course, means choosing the best frog to kiss. So you've got a lot of startups, as an angel investor or anybody else or government, you need to choose the right ones. And this is where, of course, the analogy breaks down, because in my experience, most entrepreneurs work together better in 2 or 3. So let's call them a pair, a frog pair. The chance of that frog pair turning into a prince can be improved in various ways. First of all, sufficient money for the journey, but at a valuation increase that means the frogs are still motivated by their share of the business, so don't squash them down too far. Sorry, 2 seconds. This money must be smart, from what I'm calling invested investors. That's investors who have time and the positive emotions into the startup that help mentor and coach the frogs, ensure the frogs spend their investment money wisely and prudently, ensure they adhere to the rules and regulations, health and safety, employment law, etc., and connect with later stage money, because anything that scales rapidly will need a lot of money. On top of that, access to university research, perhaps, access to markets, especially export markets, and of course, access to staff. So I'm going to say there's 2 more parts to this talk. One, how governments can help, and secondly, how they can hinder, how they can prevent help. So a number of things here. I say it'll be online, Baybars will give you this, but how can governments help this? And this is aiming at all the politicians in this room, wherever they're from. First of all, encourage angels to invest. So the angels are the people with the cash who provide the smartness. And you can do that in various ways. One way is tax reliefs to reduce the risk of investment. Now, that's true in the United Kingdom and Singapore, the various countries around the world, and now Turkey, I believe. So, but don't do those too generously. Don't give so much tax relief that it actually makes no sense not to invest. Don't give 100% tax relief. The second point for angels is to encourage them to form groups, networks and syndicates. This is both to educate novice angels and to reduce risk. The management of these groups is often funded by government, which is not a bad idea, because it's difficult. Voluntary groups struggle to run themselves well. Some funding needs to come from somewhere, and it could come from the entrepreneur, but it really makes sense for some of that to come from governments. And finally, for angels, provide training for these angels and angel groups, group leaders, particularly to lead investment deals. I know Baybars is doing something with that. I'm doing something with that. eBank's doing something with that. Lots of people are trying to help the angels. The next thing that governments can do is to provide investment capital, but not to dominate a round. By this, the government mustn't take more than 50% of the round, otherwise the behavior of the entrepreneurs changes. But putting capital in is a good thing. Having a good, well-run research and development grant system, again, many countries have got that, so they're reducing the risk, the early stage risk for these startups. Providing tax relief to startups. In the UK, we have what we call research and development grants. This is cash for spending money, risky money on research and development. Again, a good thing to do. Encourage the later stage VCs to invest, but particularly to try and make them patient. The problem with a VC, and I'm sure there's some VCs in this room, is they're on a time cycle, probably a 10-year time cycle. A life sciences business might take 15 or 20 years to get anywhere. So encourage patient capital. Another one, similar to the Fraunhofer Institutes in Germany and what we call catapults in the UK, is to provide centers of excellence. Provide grants to universities for research that will be allowed to be transferred to commercial success. Fund coaching and mentoring programs. Fund bodies that provide inward investment and export assistance to get things growing. And finally, fund entrepreneurial visas. I've almost finished. Baybars, you can sit down. And what can governments get wrong? This is, you must listen carefully. Governments must not provide tax relief to angels where the risk is low. Otherwise, all the money goes into that. An example of that in the UK is funding a pub or a hotel or a storage facility, etc. Keep the tax relief against the ones that are risky investments, particularly ones that are knowledge intensive. As I said earlier, providing too much capital, certainly, I don't know, there's 1 or 2 people from Singapore. Singapore government used to provide 75% or more of that investment. That is too high in my view. 2 more things. Getting the compromise wrong between governmental control and letting the market decide. So this is the balance between being a nanny state and letting the market be too free. That's very difficult. That's a spectrum. It's very difficult to get right. And finally, apart from the very final thing, assume that money alone is sufficient. Smart money from invested investors is absolutely crucial. But of course, the worst thing you can do of all governments, all government ministers, everybody else, is to do nothing. Do something, please. So thank you for listening.
Thank you. I'm going to put the pressure on me.